Hittite Empire. The rise and fall. 1. The Hittite Empire in context. The Hittite Empire, an ancient civilization that rose from the rugged heart of Anatolia, may not be as widely remembered as the mighty Egyptians or the Romans. Yet its influence on the ancient world was profound. Centered in what is now modern-day Turkey, this empire ruled vast territories at the peak of its power, controlling key trade routes, engaging in complex diplomacy, and leaving behind a rich legacy. The Hittites were not a singular, homogeneous group, but rather a people who evolved over time, merging different cultures and peoples into a unique society. They began as a small kingdom, but through cunning political maneuvering, military might, and strategic alliances, the Hittites would grow to control a substantial portion of the ancient Near East. At its zenith, the Hittite Empire rivaled Egypt, Babylon, and Assyria in power and influence. But like all great empires, it too would experience a dramatic decline, its capital city Hattusa, lying in ruins by the 12th century BCE, swallowed by mystery and time. This video will explore the rise, golden age, and eventual fall of the Hittite Empire, examining the key events and critical factors that shaped its destiny. From its early days as a fledgling kingdom to its position as one of the most powerful states of the ancient world, the Hittites' story is one of ambition, conquest, and a struggle to survive in an ever-changing world. As we journey through their history, we will explore not just the politics and military battles, but also the cultural, economic, and social aspects that defined the Hittite people. From their interactions with Egypt and Mesopotamia to their advancements in law, agriculture, and ironworking, the legacy of the Hittites continues to reverberate in modern times. But before we delve into the rise and fall of this great empire, let's first look at the origins of the Hittites. Who were these people, and how did they come to shape such a powerful empire? 2. The origins of the Hittite people. Long before the mighty empire was forged, the roots of the Hittites lay deep within the hills and valleys of Anatolia, a region that would become one of the world's most influential crossroads. But how did a people from this remote and rugged land rise to the level of empire? Their story begins around 2000 BCE, when the Hittites were not yet a unified group, but a collection of tribes and communities. The Hittites were Indo-European in origin, an ancient group, who migrated into Anatolia from the steppes of Central Asia. They were part of a broader movement of peoples that spread westward across Asia and into Europe. While little is known about their precise migration patterns, we do know that by the 18th century BCE, they had established themselves in central Anatolia, in an area that would become known as the Hittite heartland. These early Hittites were influenced by the cultures surrounding them. To the south, the mighty Egyptians were building the foundations of their great empire. To the east, the Mesopotamians were laying the groundwork for some of the first complex societies. The Hittites were exposed to many of these civilizations, and though they were initially isolated in the hills, they adopted elements of their neighbors' technologies, social structures, and governance. One of the key characteristics of the Hittite people was their unique language. The Hittites spoke a language that was part of the larger Indo-European family, which set them apart from the Semitic-speaking peoples of the region. This language, Hittite, was eventually recorded using a form of cuneiform borrowed from the Mesopotamians. Through their inscriptions, we have glimpses of their early history, culture, and religion. At this early stage, the Hittites were not yet unified under one king or state, but were instead a loose collection of city-states. These early city-states were influenced by the larger kingdoms around them, particularly the Babylonians. The Hittites traded with their neighbors, often seeking precious metals, timber, and other goods. The region's natural resources, such as the rich mines of Anatolia, became vital to their survival and prosperity. The Hittites' first significant step toward statehood came with the formation of the Old Hittite Kingdom, which began around 1700 BCE. The key city of this early phase was Hattusa, located near the present-day village of Boğazkale in central Turkey. Hattusa was strategically positioned, located near the confluence of two rivers and surrounded by rugged hills that made it naturally defensible. It would eventually become the capital of the Hittite Empire, but before it could reach its full potential, the Hittites had to survive in a world of shifting alliances and rivalries. During this period, the Hittites were influenced by the powerful kingdoms of the Near East, notably the Akkadian and Babylonian civilizations. In fact, the earliest known Hittite king, Labarnus, I likely established his rule by conquering a region that had once been part of the old Babylonian Empire. This is a crucial point because it marks the first instance of Hittite military might and territorial expansion, even though it was limited at first. The Hittites were not the only power in Anatolia at this time. The region was also home to the Hattians, an ancient people who lived in the central Anatolian plateau. It is likely that the Hittites absorbed elements of Hattian culture, particularly their religious practices, as the Hittites began to evolve their own distinct identity. The Hittites came to dominate the Hattians, merging their traditions, languages, and customs, which would lay the foundation for their future successes. In the midst of this early history, the Hittites' primary concern was survival. Constantly caught between the mighty civilizations of Mesopotamia and Egypt, they had to rely on a mix of diplomacy, military strength, and strategic alliances. The Hittites were adept at using these tools, forging alliances with neighboring peoples when necessary, and engaging in trade to support their economy. While the Hittites were initially confined to Anatolia, their interactions with their neighbors laid the groundwork for what would become an empire. Their early history is marked by both war and diplomacy, and while they were not yet a world power, they were clearly on the path toward something greater. As we move forward, we will explore how the Hittites transitioned from a collection of city-states into a kingdom with true imperial ambitions. This period of transformation began in the 17th century BCE as the Hittites began to consolidate power and establish the military, political, and economic systems that would allow them to become one of the dominant forces in the ancient world. 3. Early kingdoms, the formation of the Hittite state. By the 18th century BCE, the Hittites were no longer just isolated tribes or small city-states. They began to establish a more formal kingdom, and one of the first significant steps toward the formation of the Hittite state came under the leadership of King Hattusa I. The political landscape of Anatolia was about to change forever. This was the period when the Hittite people began to consolidate power and lay the foundation for a future empire. Hattusa I is credited with the founding of the Old Hittite Kingdom around 1700 BCE. His rule marked the beginning of a more organized and centralized political structure. Prior to Hattusa I, the Hittites were divided among numerous small kingdoms, each one independent, and often in conflict with the others. But as time passed, the need for unity became more apparent, especially in the face of external threats. The city of Hattusa, with its strategic location, played a crucial role in this transformation. Situated in central Anatolia, Hattusa had natural defensive advantages, including steep cliffs and river barriers. It became the primary political and cultural center of the Hittite kingdom. Hattusa I wisely chose to make Hattusa the capital, cementing its status as the heart of Hittite civilization. In the years that followed, the Hittites expanded their territory and began to conquer neighboring cities and tribes. Hattusa III's military campaigns pushed the Hittite borders further into Anatolia and beyond. While the Hittites' early battles were small in scale, compared to the epic conflicts that would define later centuries, they set the stage for the Hittite kingdom to become a significant power in the region. One of the key reasons for the success of the Hittites during this time was their ability to adopt and adapt the strategies and technologies of the neighboring civilizations. From the Babylonians, the Hittites learned to write in cuneiform, which became the foundation of their record-keeping and administration. The Hittites also absorbed aspects of Babylonian culture, including legal codes, which would later influence their own legal system. Though the Hittites were gaining power, their rise was not without challenges. The region was home to other powerful and ambitious kingdoms, such as the Assyrians to the southeast and the Egyptians to the south. For the Hittites, diplomacy played as important a role as military might. They forged alliances with neighboring powers, especially the Babylonians and the Assyrians, to maintain a balance of power and to ensure their survival. In addition to warfare and diplomacy, the Hittites relied on trade to support their growing economy. Anatolia was rich in natural resources, particularly timber metal ores and agricultural products. These resources were vital to the Hittite kingdom, and they began to establish trade routes that connected them to distant lands, including Mesopotamia and the Aegean coast. By the end of the 17th century, BCE, the Hittites had built a kingdom that was more than just a loose confederation of city-states. They had established a centralized authority with a king at the helm. This marked the beginning of the Hittite Empire's rise. Hattusa the Rear's success in consolidating power and expanding territory would influence future generations of Hittite rulers, laying the groundwork for an empire that would dominate much of the ancient Near East. However, it was not only military conquest and diplomacy that contributed to the formation of the Hittite state. The Hittites also developed a unique legal system heavily influenced by the laws of Mesopotamia. These laws helped to bring order to their growing society and allowed for more efficient governance. Hittite laws were inscribed on tablets, many of which have survived to this day, providing valuable insights into the Hittites' legal, social, and economic structures. At the heart of this transformation was a king who understood the importance of not only military conquest, but also diplomacy, law, and governance. Hattusa the Firn's ability to unite the diverse peoples of Anatolia and bring them under a single banner was a pivotal moment in Hittite history. His reign marked the birth of the Hittite kingdom, and it was under his leadership that the Hittites began their journey toward empire. As we move forward, we will explore how the Hittites took their first significant steps toward becoming a dominant power in the ancient world. The old Hittite kingdom would eventually give way to an even more powerful and influential state under the leadership of their successors, such as Suppiluliuma Farchon. But before that, the early years of Hittite expansion, consolidation, and governance laid the essential foundation for what was to come. 4. The Old Kingdom, 1700–1500 BCE foundation of power. The Hittite Empire in its earliest phase flourished under what we know today as the Old Kingdom, 1700–1500 BCE. This was a period marked by territorial expansion, the establishment of a centralized government, and military development that would later define the empire's success. As we saw earlier, the Hittites had a slow and steady rise, with a fragmented society of city-states slowly coalescing into a more powerful kingdom under the leadership of Hattusa I. However, the Old Kingdom was more than just consolidation. It was a time of transformation and foundation building. With its strategic capital at Hattusa, the kingdom had begun its journey toward becoming a regional power. But to achieve this, they had to solidify both their internal and external influence, and this came with the leadership of powerful kings, each contributing to the framework of what would later become the Hittite Empire. The political structure of the Old Kingdom was relatively simple. The king, or Lugal, was the supreme ruler, though the kingdom had to balance power with the royal council and various city-state elites who had their own political interests. However, the monarchy was central, and it was through their military campaigns and diplomatic relationships that the Hittites sought to grow their power. The period saw a rise in military conquests, particularly under the rule of the famous king Hattusa I and his successors, who began expanding Hittite influence far beyond Anatolia. These early military campaigns often involved clashes with neighboring city-states, particularly those to the east in Mesopotamia. One of the most significant conquests during the Old Kingdom was the defeat of the Luwians and other Anatolian tribes, which allowed the Hittites to extend their territory and influence throughout central Anatolia. Yet it was not only warfare that enabled the Hittites to solidify their position as a growing power. During this period, the Hittites engaged in significant trade with their neighbors, including Egypt and the civilizations of the Near East. Trade became a key element of the Hittite economy. Timber, a valuable resource in the mountainous regions of Anatolia, became a major export along with metals such as copper and iron. The Hittites' strategic location allowed them to control key trade routes that connected Mesopotamia, Egypt, and the Aegean region. These trade networks played an essential role in strengthening the Hittite economy. They imported luxury goods and raw materials from their neighbors and offered their resources in return. Over time, the Hittites became known for their fine metalwork, especially their production of bronze and iron tools, which were highly sought after across the ancient world. At the same time, the Hittites developed a sophisticated system of laws that governed their society. The Hittite laws, heavily influenced by those of the Babylonians, were inscribed on tablets and provided a detailed account of the kingdom's legal, social, and economic practices. These laws covered everything from property rights to punishments for criminal offenses. They helped establish a sense of order and justice within the kingdom and provided a foundation for governance that would influence later civilizations. Religious practices were also central to the foundation of Hittite power. The Hittites, like many ancient peoples, believed that their kings were chosen by the gods. The storm god Tarhunt was considered the chief deity, and religious ceremonies were deeply intertwined with the daily life of the Hittite people. Temples dedicated to Tarhunt and other deities were built in Hattusa and other key cities, playing an important role in cementing the king's divine authority. These religious institutions also helped maintain social cohesion and were crucial for the legitimization of the monarchy. During the Old Kingdom, the Hittites also began developing their system of royal succession, which would evolve over time. The kingship was often passed down through the male line, though the royal family's power was frequently challenged by rival factions within the kingdom. Despite these challenges, the monarchy managed to maintain its authority, especially as the Hittites continued to expand and solidify their territory. However, the Old Kingdom did face internal struggles as well. As the kingdom expanded, so too did the complexity of governing a larger, more diverse population. There were occasional rebellions by subject peoples, especially those from the Hittite-controlled cities and provinces. These challenges were exacerbated by the shifting alliances and rivalries among neighboring powers in the ancient Near East. Despite these challenges, the Old Kingdom saw the rise of a true Hittite identity. The kingdom had firmly established its territorial boundaries, its military prowess, and its economic and cultural presence. This period was crucial in setting the stage for the empire's expansion in the coming centuries. One of the lasting legacies of the Old Kingdom was the establishment of Hattusa as the central power of the Hittite state. The city was expanded and fortified, with monumental walls and gates being constructed. The city's strategic location, coupled with its cultural and economic significance, made it a key symbol of Hittite power. As we move forward, we will see how the Hittite kingdom evolved into a powerful empire, under the leadership of the great king Suppiluliuma, whose reign marked the transition from a kingdom to an empire. The foundation laid during the Old Kingdom would become the bedrock upon which the Hittites would rise to their peak. 5. The rise of the Hittite kingdom. Strategic alliances and expansion. As we step into the 15th century BCE, the Hittite kingdom, having laid the groundwork during the Old Kingdom, began to emerge as a formidable force in the ancient Near East. The rise of the Hittites during this period was marked not only by military conquest, but also by savvy political alliances that shaped their growth and solidified their position as a regional power. One of the key factors behind the Hittites' rise was their ability to form strategic alliances with neighboring powers, especially the powerful kingdoms of Egypt and Mesopotamia. While earlier Hittite rulers had expanded through military conquest, the next generation of kings recognized the importance of diplomacy. These alliances would prove essential in both securing Hittite territory and ensuring its survival in a volatile region. The Hittites understood the value of relationships with powerful neighbors, and they leveraged these connections to their advantage. During this period, the Hittites forged a particularly important relationship with Egypt. The two powers were often in direct conflict over control of trade routes and territories, but both recognized the need for a more stable and peaceful coexistence. One of the most significant diplomatic moves during this period occurred under the reign of King Suppiluliuma, 1380–1346 BCE, who is often regarded as one of the greatest Hittite kings. He saw the importance of peace with Egypt and sought to avoid direct confrontation with their powerful southern neighbor. Suppiluliuma I's reign was marked by a series of well-timed alliances and treaties that strengthened the Hittite kingdom's position. But it was not just Egypt that the Hittites sought alliances with. They also developed crucial relations with the Babylonians, the Mitanni, and the Assyrians, all of whom played a role in the Hittites' strategic rise. The Mitanni in particular were a powerful kingdom to the northeast of the Hittites, and their relationship with the Hittites would define the geopolitical landscape of the time. By forging alliances with these key powers, the Hittites ensured they could consolidate their position and resist the pressure from other kingdoms in the region. Simultaneously, the Hittites recognized the importance of military strength, and they worked to expand their army. The Hittite military was innovative, especially in its use of chariots. The chariot had become a symbol of power, and the Hittites were skilled in utilizing them in battle. The chariot corps was a key part of Hittite military strategy, giving them an advantage over many of their neighbors. With this new military prowess, the Hittites were able to expand their borders and control more territories. Suppiluliuma's reign was also defined by his military campaigns. His efforts were focused on securing the Hittite kingdom's borders and establishing control over the key regions of Syria and northern Mesopotamia. Under his leadership, the Hittites marched into the heart of the Mitanni kingdom and decisively defeated them, expanding their territory dramatically. This victory over the Mitanni marked a critical turning point for the Hittites, allowing them to establish dominance in the region and extending their influence to the edge of Mesopotamia. The Hittites also took advantage of their position along crucial trade routes, controlling the flow of goods between Mesopotamia, Anatolia, and the Levant. Trade became a central component of the Hittite economy. They traded not only goods like textiles, grains, and timber, but also precious metals and luxury items. This exchange allowed the Hittites to accumulate wealth, which in turn fueled further expansion and the development of Hittite society. The prosperity brought by trade also allowed the Hittites to build monumental architectural projects, including the famous city walls and gates of Hattusa, which served as both a defensive measure and a symbol of Hittite power. Under Suppiluliuma, the Hittite capital at Hattusa was transformed into a grand city that showcased the might and wealth of the Hittite kingdom. The city's layout and architecture reflected the Hittites' organizational prowess and their desire to establish themselves as a major player in the ancient world. The impressive city walls, gates, and temples at Hattusa stood as testaments to the Hittites' military and cultural strength. The Hittite rise was also marked by the ability of their rulers to integrate conquered peoples. Suppiluliuma I's success in this area was notable. Instead of simply imposing Hittite rule on conquered peoples, he often allowed them a degree of autonomy while still ensuring their loyalty to the Hittite king. This strategy helped to maintain stability within the empire and fostered a sense of unity among the diverse peoples under Hittite control. Many of these conquered regions, such as the Mitanni, were assimilated into Hittite society through marriages, trade, and cultural exchange. However, the rise of the Hittites was not without challenges. The powerful neighbors to the south, the Egyptians, were a constant source of tension. Though the Hittites had managed to form a diplomatic relationship with Egypt, tensions still simmered between the two kingdoms. These tensions would later boil over into the famous Battle of Kadesh, a pivotal moment in Hittite history. Despite these challenges, the Hittites had solidified their position as one of the leading powers in the ancient Near East. Their military successes, strategic alliances, and trade networks all contributed to their rise. The Hittite kingdom under Suppiluliuma I had truly begun its transformation into an empire. As we move forward in our journey through Hittite history, we will examine the golden age of the Hittite Empire, marked by further military victories, political stability, and cultural development, particularly under the reign of Suppiluliuma's successors. 6. The reign of Suppiluliuma, 1380–1346 BCE. The empire's golden age begins. The reign of Suppiluliuma I marked the dawn of the Hittite Empire's golden age. From 1380 to 1346 BCE, Suppiluliuma's military and diplomatic prowess propelled the Hittite kingdom into an era of unprecedented power and influence. His rule was a defining moment in Hittite history, characterized by strategic conquests, diplomatic maneuvers, and a lasting legacy that would shape the empire for generations to come. Suppiluliuma I inherited a Hittite kingdom that was already gaining strength, but he quickly proved himself as a far more ambitious and capable ruler than his predecessors. While earlier kings had expanded the kingdom through military conquest, Suppiluliuma I took this to new heights, transforming the Hittites from a kingdom into a true empire. His reign is often considered the high point of Hittite power, as it saw the expansion of Hittite territory, the consolidation of political control, and the strengthening of the Hittite military. A defining feature of Suppiluliuma's rule was his approach to diplomacy. During his reign, the Hittites formed strategic alliances with powerful neighboring kingdoms, most notably Egypt. The relationship between Egypt and the Hittites had been one of rivalry and tension, but Suppiluliuma I recognized the need to stabilize the region through diplomacy. His most notable diplomatic achievement was the treaty with Pharaoh Ramses II of Egypt. This treaty, the Treaty of Kadesh, was signed after a series of intense military encounters between the two powers, including the famous Battle of Kadesh in 1274 BCE. While the battle itself did not result in a decisive victory for either side, it was the subsequent treaty that solidified the relationship between the Hittites and the Egyptians, ensuring peace and cooperation for many years. But Suppiluliuma I's diplomacy was not limited to Egypt. He also engaged in a series of military campaigns against the Mitanni, a powerful kingdom to the northeast of the Hittites. The Mitanni had long been a thorn in the side of the Hittites, and Suppiluliuma's military genius came to the forefront when he decisively defeated the Mitanni. His victory over the Mitanni not only expanded Hittite territory, but also secured the Hittites' control over key trade routes in the region. This conquest allowed the Hittites to establish their dominance over northern Mesopotamia and solidified their status as a leading power in the ancient Near East. Suppiluliuma I's military campaigns also extended to Syria, where he captured a number of important cities. His victory in Syria marked a significant shift in the balance of power in the region. The Hittites, once a relatively isolated kingdom in Anatolia, were now able to project their power far beyond their traditional borders. With the conquest of Syria, the Hittites gained access to important trade routes that connected the Mediterranean to the heart of Mesopotamia. These new trade connections enriched the Hittite economy, further fueling their military and political expansion. Along with military conquest, Suppiluliuma I undertook a series of internal reforms to strengthen the Hittite state. One of his most important contributions was the establishment of a more centralized government. While earlier Hittite rulers had relied on a more decentralized system with local rulers exerting significant influence, Suppiluliuma I created a more unified administration that allowed for greater control over the vast territories the Hittites had conquered. He also improved the infrastructure of the kingdom, including the fortification of cities and the construction of roads that facilitated communication and trade. Culturally, Suppiluliuma I's reign was a time of great achievement. Under his leadership, the Hittite Empire experienced a flourishing of art, architecture, and literature. The famous city of Hattusa, the Hittite capital, was expanded and beautified during his reign. The city's impressive walls and gates, which still stand today as a testament to the Hittites' architectural prowess, were constructed during this time. The city also became a center of culture and learning, attracting scholars, artists, and craftsmen from across the empire. The military success of Suppiluliuma I was complemented by his diplomatic acumen. He skillfully navigated the complex web of alliances and rivalries that defined the ancient Near East. His ability to maintain peace with Egypt while simultaneously asserting Hittite dominance over Mesopotamia and Syria marked him as one of the most skilled statesmen of his era. Yet despite all his achievements, Suppiluliuma I's reign was not without challenges. The Hittite Empire was a vast and diverse state, and maintaining control over such a large territory was no easy task. Suppiluliuma I had to deal with internal dissent and the occasional rebellion from the provinces, particularly in the newly acquired territories. However, his strong leadership and military prowess ensured that these rebellions were quickly quelled and Hittite control remained firmly intact. Perhaps one of the most enduring legacies of Suppiluliuma I's reign was the establishment of the Hittite Empire as a major player in the ancient world. The empire he built was one of the most powerful and influential states of its time, and it would continue to exert its influence long after his death. Suppiluliuma I's successors would inherit a strong and prosperous empire, but it was during his reign that the foundations of Hittite power were truly solidified. As we move forward, we will see how the empire continued to thrive and how Suppiluliuma's heirs would carry forward his legacy. But it is important to recognize that the achievements of Suppiluliuma I were not just military or political. They were also cultural, laying the groundwork for the golden age of the Hittite Empire. 7. The Hittite society and culture. As the Hittite Empire grew in power, it also blossomed in culture, economy, and social structure. This was an empire that not only expanded its borders, but also developed a distinct identity that merged the traditions of Anatolia with the influences of neighboring civilizations, such as the Babylonians and the Egyptians. The richness of Hittite society, its cultural achievements, and its sophisticated governance contributed greatly to the empire's success during its height. At the heart of Hittite society was the king, who was both a political leader and a religious figure. Kingship in the Hittite Empire was intertwined with divine approval, a concept that echoed the ancient tradition of rulers being the earthly representatives of the gods. The Hittite king, known as the Great King, wielded supreme authority over military, judicial, and religious matters. This centralization of power allowed the Hittites to maintain control over their vast territories and diverse populations. However, the role of the king was not solely political. Religion played an important part in the daily lives of the Hittites, and kings were expected to serve as high priests, offering sacrifices to the gods to ensure prosperity and favor. The Hittites were polytheistic, with a pantheon of deities who controlled various aspects of life. The most important god was Tarhunt, the storm god who was associated with weather and war. Other notable deities included the sun goddess Araniti and the fertility goddess Hebat. The gods were believed to directly intervene in the affairs of humans, and it was the king's duty to maintain their favor through ritual sacrifice and devotion. In addition to their religious duties, the Hittite kings also played a central role in the administration of the empire. They oversaw the collection of taxes, the distribution of land, and the appointment of officials. The empire was divided into provinces, each governed by a local ruler who was loyal to the king. These provincial governors were responsible for maintaining order within their territories and ensuring that the king's commands were carried out. The social structure of the Hittite Empire was hierarchical, with the king and his family at the top. Beneath them were the nobility, priests, and scribes, followed by the craftsmen, farmers, and laborers who formed the bulk of Hittite society. Slavery existed, but it was not as widespread as in other ancient civilizations. Slaves were often prisoners of war or people who had fallen into debt. Nevertheless, they played a crucial role in the economy, particularly in the labor-intensive fields of agriculture and construction. Hittite society was also marked by a strong tradition of law and justice. The Hittites had a sophisticated legal system with laws that covered everything from property rights to personal conduct. These laws were codified in written form, and copies were often displayed in public spaces to ensure that all citizens were aware of the rules governing their behavior. The legal code was relatively progressive for its time, offering protections for women and slaves, and emphasizing the importance of fairness in judicial matters. The Hittites were also known for their advancements in writing and record-keeping. They used cuneiform script to inscribe laws, treaties, and royal decrees, and they adopted the Akkadian language as a diplomatic lingua franca. Hittite cuneiform inscriptions have survived to this day, offering a glimpse into the administration, legal systems, and diplomacy of the empire. The use of writing also allowed the Hittites to preserve their history and cultural achievements, providing us with a detailed record of their reign. Hittite culture was also deeply influenced by the civilizations around them. While they maintained their own unique traditions, the Hittites were quick to adopt and adapt the cultural practices of their neighbors. The Hittites were particularly influenced by Mesopotamian art, literature, and architecture. For instance, the Hittite royal palaces and temples were often built in the same style as those of the Babylonians, with massive stone reliefs and intricate carvings adorning the walls. These artistic features not only served as decoration, but also as symbols of the king's power and divine mandate. The Hittites were also known for their skilled craftsmanship. They were accomplished metalworkers, especially in the production of bronze and iron tools. Iron in particular was highly prized, and the Hittites were among the first to develop the techniques necessary for smelting and forging iron. This technological advancement gave the Hittites a military advantage, as they were able to produce stronger weapons and armor than their enemies. The use of iron also contributed to the Hittites' economic prosperity, as they were able to trade these valuable goods with neighboring civilizations. In addition to their metalworking skills, The Hittites were also skilled in pottery weaving and other crafts. These products were highly prized and traded throughout the ancient Near East, contributing to the Hittite Empire's economic success. The craftwork was not limited to utilitarian objects. The Hittites also produced beautiful art and jewelry, often incorporating intricate designs and precious stones. Culturally, the Hittites had a rich tradition of literature and storytelling. Much of their literature has been lost to time, but what remains provides insight into their values, beliefs, and worldview. One of the most famous works of Hittite literature is the Song of Ullikummi, an epic poem that tells the story of the struggle between the gods and a monstrous figure. This poem, along with other fragments of Hittite literature, shows that the Hittites had a complex mythological tradition rich with symbolism and moral lessons. The Hittite Empire then was not only a military power, but also a vibrant and sophisticated civilization. Its people were deeply connected to their land, their gods, and their culture. The social, cultural, and economic foundations built during this period would play a significant role in the empire's success and its eventual decline. As we continue our journey through Hittite history, we will see how the empire's golden age gave way to challenges that would eventually lead to its fall. 8. The military strength of the Hittites. The Hittite Empire's military was one of the key pillars that upheld its dominance and power in the ancient Near East. Their ability to conquer vast territories and defend their borders was a testament to the efficiency and innovation of their military forces. The Hittites were not only skilled in traditional warfare, but also pioneers in military tactics, particularly with their use of chariots, which would define much of their military identity. The core of the Hittite military was its army, which consisted of infantry chariots and cavalry. The Hittites were among the earliest civilizations to effectively utilize chariots in battle. These chariots were not just used for transportation or ceremonial purposes, but were a critical element of their military strategy. The Hittite chariots were light, fast, and highly maneuverable, designed for speed and agility. They were typically drawn by 2 horses and armed with a driver and a warrior who carried weapons like spears or bows. These chariots could quickly move across the battlefield, strike at the enemy, and retreat before the opposing forces had a chance to react. The effectiveness of the Hittite chariots became apparent during major battles, including their engagement with the Egyptians at the Battle of Kadesh in 1274 BCE. Although the outcome of the battle was inconclusive, with both sides claiming victory, it showcased the power of the Hittite chariot corps. In the battle, both Hittite and Egyptian forces used chariots extensively, but the Hittites' chariotry was arguably more advanced, allowing them to dominate the battlefield for extended periods. This event would later lead to a peace treaty between Egypt and the Hittites, demonstrating the respect both powers had for each other's military strength. In addition to their chariotry, the Hittites also employed infantry, which was composed of foot soldiers armed with a variety of weapons, including swords, spears, and shields. These soldiers played a vital role in sieging cities and holding strategic positions during extended military campaigns. The Hittite infantry was well-trained and disciplined, able to fight in tight formations that allowed them to withstand enemy charges and maintain their ground. Hittite military leadership was equally crucial in maintaining the empire's strength. Kings like Suppiluliuma demonstrated strategic brilliance in both warfare and diplomacy, often leading their armies into battle themselves. The Hittites' military commanders were well-versed in siege warfare, using advanced techniques to break through enemy fortifications. They utilized battering rams, siege towers, and other tools of war to gain the upper hand during battles. One of the most significant military innovations of the Hittites was their use of the battle axe, a weapon that was effective both in close combat and in disrupting enemy formations. The Hittites developed several varieties of battle axes, some designed for cutting through armor, while others were meant for general combat. These weapons, combined with the Hittites' mastery of ironworking, made their soldiers formidable opponents on the battlefield. The Hittites' military tactics were characterized by their adaptability. They studied and learned from their enemies, and over time their strategies evolved to incorporate new techniques. This adaptability made them a constant threat to their neighbors and enabled them to maintain their dominance for centuries. They were adept at both offensive and defensive operations, knowing when to strike and when to consolidate power. The Hittite military was also integral to the empire's economy. It was a force that not only expanded the empire's borders, but also protected trade routes, ensuring the flow of goods and resources across the region. Control over these trade routes was vital, as it allowed the Hittites to access valuable resources such as metals from Anatolia, which they used to produce weapons tools and armor. The empire's wealth from trade, combined with its military strength, allowed it to flourish during its peak. Furthermore, the Hittites practiced military diplomacy. They would often use alliances and marriages as tools to avoid conflicts and expand their influence. These alliances were strengthened by shared military goals and mutual benefits. The Hittites also engaged in extensive intelligence operations, using spies to monitor the movements of their enemies and ensure that they stayed one step ahead in battle. This was a testament to the sophistication of their military strategy. Despite their strengths, the Hittite military was not invincible. While they achieved remarkable victories, the Hittites eventually faced threats from multiple directions, including invasions from the Sea Peoples, internal rebellions, and external powers like the Egyptians and the Assyrians. These factors, combined with the gradual weakening of the Hittite political structure, eventually led to the decline of the empire's military might. But during its peak, the Hittite military stood as one of the most powerful forces in the ancient world. The combination of chariotry, infantry, and strategic leadership, coupled with their ability to adapt and innovate, made the Hittites a dominant military force in the Near East. As we continue to explore the rise and fall of the Hittite Empire, we'll see how the military strength of the Hittites helped to expand their empire, protect their borders, and influence the cultures of the ancient world. However, the challenges of maintaining such power, combined with other factors, would eventually lead to the downfall of the Hittite Empire. 9. The Hittite economy, trade, agriculture, and innovation. The economy of the Hittite Empire was a complex system that allowed the kingdom to thrive and expand across the ancient world. At the height of its power, the Hittites controlled key trade routes, exploited the natural resources of Anatolia, and established economic systems that integrated agriculture, craft industries, and innovation. The empire's ability to harness its economic potential was crucial in its rise and sustained dominance for centuries. The Hittite economy was primarily based on agriculture, which was the backbone of the empire's sustenance. The fertile valleys and plains of Anatolia provided an ideal environment for farming, and the Hittites grew a wide variety of crops, including wheat, barley, and legumes. These crops formed the staple diet of the Hittite people, providing both food for the population and surpluses that could be traded with neighboring regions. One of the most important aspects of Hittite agriculture was its highly developed irrigation systems. To ensure their crops flourished in the sometimes arid climate of Anatolia, the Hittites developed sophisticated techniques for managing water resources. They constructed canals, reservoirs, and wells, which allowed them to water their crops and sustain agriculture even during periods of drought. This made their agricultural output reliable and consistent, which in turn fueled the growth of their cities and enabled the Hittites to support a large population. Alongside agriculture, the Hittites were also skilled in animal husbandry. They raised cattle, sheep, and goats for food as well as for trade. The Hittites used cattle for plowing fields, and transporting goods and sheep provided wool, which was spun into textiles. These agricultural and animal products were vital to the Hittite economy, providing both sustenance and raw materials for trade. Trade was another crucial aspect of the Hittite economy. Anatolia's location made it a crossroads between east and west, and the Hittites took full advantage of this strategic position. They established and maintained trade routes that connected the Mediterranean, the Aegean Sea, Mesopotamia, and Egypt. These trade routes allowed the Hittites to acquire resources that were not readily available in Anatolia, such as timber, precious metals, and luxury goods. In exchange, the Hittites exported products like textiles, pottery, and weapons, all of which were highly sought after by neighboring civilizations. The Hittites were particularly skilled metalworkers, and their ability to extract and forge metals, such as copper, bronze, and iron, gave them a significant advantage over other civilizations. Iron was particularly valuable, and the Hittites were among the first in the ancient world to develop advanced iron smelting techniques. This gave them a competitive edge both in trade and in warfare, as iron tools and weapons were far superior to those made from bronze. The Hittites controlled important sources of iron ore in Anatolia, and this resource became a vital part of their economy and military strength. The importance of trade and metallurgy is evident in the rise of the Hittites as a major power in the ancient world. Their wealth from trade and their technological advancements in metalworking allowed them to build a powerful military and influence the political landscape of the Near East. Through their trade relationships, the Hittites established themselves as a cultural and economic hub, influencing surrounding regions and spreading their innovations. Craft industries, particularly pottery, also played an important role in the Hittite economy. The Hittites produced a wide range of pottery, from everyday utilitarian objects to beautifully decorated ceramics that were used in religious ceremonies. These items were not only used in Hittite homes, but were also traded with neighboring peoples. Hittite pottery has been found in archaeological sites as far away as Egypt and Mesopotamia, showing the extent of the empire's trade network. The Hittites were also known for their impressive architectural achievements, which were closely linked to their economy. The construction of massive city walls, temples, and palaces required a skilled workforce and abundant resources, including stone, timber, and metal. The Hittites were masters of building defensive fortifications, and their cities were often heavily fortified with monumental gates and walls designed to withstand attacks. The city of Hattusa, the empire's capital, was a prime example of Hittite architectural ingenuity. The city's walls, built using massive stones, are still standing today, a testament to the durability and planning behind Hittite construction. In addition to these achievements, the Hittites were also innovators in other fields. Their legal system was one of the earliest in the ancient world, and it provided a framework for trade, land ownership, and governance. The Hittite legal codes were detailed and comprehensive, covering issues such as contracts, disputes, and punishments. These laws helped maintain order and stability within the empire and were integral to the functioning of their economy. Furthermore, the Hittites were known for their advances in the fields of science and astronomy. They used their knowledge of the stars and the movements of celestial bodies to guide agricultural practices, particularly in relation to planting and harvesting crops. This understanding of the natural world helped the Hittites manage their agricultural production more effectively, ensuring that they could feed their growing population. However, despite the economic prosperity and technological innovations, the Hittite economy also faced challenges. Maintaining control over such a vast empire meant that the Hittites had to deal with the costs of warfare, infrastructure, and governance. The resources required to maintain a powerful military and support a large population sometimes strained the economy. Additionally, the empire's reliance on trade routes meant that disruptions such as invasions or political instability could severely impact the economy. In the end, the Hittite Empire's economic success was one of the key factors that allowed it to rise to power and maintain dominance for several centuries. The wealth generated from trade agriculture and metalworking fueled the military and cultural achievements of the Hittites, enabling them to establish one of the most powerful empires in the ancient world. Yet, as we will see, the same economic and political pressures that allowed the empire to rise would also contribute to its eventual decline. 10. The Hittite religion and diplomacy. Religion and diplomacy were not only central to the daily life of the Hittite people, but also to the empire's stability and expansion. The Hittites, like many ancient civilizations, believed that their relationship with the divine influenced their success in war, peace, and governance. Their religion was complex and deeply integrated into their political and military strategies, while their diplomatic efforts often reflected this connection between religion and the state. At the core of the Hittite religious system was the belief that their kings were chosen by the gods. This divine kingship theory legitimized the ruler's authority and reinforced the connection between the divine and the earthly realm. Kings such as Suppiluliuma I and his successors regularly sought the approval of the gods before embarking on military campaigns or making major political decisions. Before a battle or significant event, the king would often offer prayers and sacrifices, consulting oracles and priests for divine guidance. This practice was intended to ensure the king's actions were in accordance with the will of the gods, thus guaranteeing success and divine favor. The pantheon of Hittite gods was vast and included deities associated with natural elements, war, fertility, and the afterlife. The most prominent among them was Tarhunt, the storm god, who represented strength and warfare. Tarhunt was often depicted wielding a club and was believed to control the forces of nature, including thunderstorms, rain, and floods, making him a vital figure in both the religious and military realms. The Hittites built grand temples to honor their gods, and the capital city of Hattusa was home to many of these sacred sites. These temples were not just religious centers, but also political symbols reinforcing the divine right of the king and the importance of religion in state affairs. Another important deity was Araniti, the sun goddess, who was central to the fertility rites and agricultural cycles of the Hittites. The Hittites believed that the gods provided for their harvests, and that the king's relationship with these deities would directly impact the success of the kingdom's agricultural output. This connection between religion and agriculture was vital for the survival of the Hittite Empire, as a large portion of its economy was based on farming and the collection of resources. Religious ceremonies often involved the king performing rituals and sacrifices to seek favor from the gods. These acts were meant to show devotion and humility, demonstrating the king's role as a servant of the divine. During these rituals, the king would pray for protection, prosperity, and victory in battle. Priests played an important role in this process, interpreting the will of the gods and conducting the ceremonies. The divine nature of the king was reinforced by the fact that he was not just a political leader, but a high priest, acting as an intermediary between the gods and his people. Beyond religious practices, diplomacy was another crucial element of Hittite statecraft. The Hittites were skilled diplomats, forming alliances with neighboring kingdoms and securing treaties that allowed them to maintain a balance of power. One of the most famous diplomatic events in Hittite history was the signing of the Treaty of Kadesh with Egypt. After the inconclusive Battle of Kadesh in 1274 BCE, which involved both the Hittites and Egyptians, a peace treaty was negotiated, making it one of the earliest known peace accords in recorded history. The treaty was not only a political agreement, but also a symbolic act showing that both empires respected each other's power and authority. It was signed by Pharaoh Ramses II of Egypt and Hattusa III of the Hittites, and was etched into stone in both Egyptian and Hittite languages, further demonstrating the importance of diplomacy in securing peace. This treaty also revealed how diplomacy was intricately linked to the religious and cultural practices of the time. The Hittites saw the treaty not just as a political maneuver, but as an agreement that was blessed by the gods, ensuring that the terms would be upheld by both parties. It was common for ancient treaties to involve oaths and sacrifices invoking divine witnesses to enforce the agreements. Moreover, the Hittites' diplomatic relations extended beyond Egypt and Mesopotamia. They formed alliances with the Mitanni, Babylon, and Assyria at various points in time. These alliances were vital for the Hittites to maintain a balance of power in the region and protect their borders. Marriages between royal families were a common diplomatic tool used by the Hittites to strengthen these ties, as the union of royal families symbolized not just political power, but the blending of divine favor. These alliances, however, were not always stable. Rivalries, internal conflicts, and changing circumstances often led to shifts in diplomatic relationships, but the Hittites' diplomatic strategy allowed them to navigate these challenges with skill. The religious and diplomatic strategies of the Hittites were not without their complexities. At times, their dealings with other powers led to confrontations, as in the case of their prolonged conflict with Egypt over control of Syrian territories. But even in these moments of warfare, diplomacy remained at the heart of Hittite foreign policy. Military victories were often followed by peace treaties, indicating that the Hittites saw war and diplomacy as complementary tools in their statecraft. Internally, the Hittites also used religion and diplomacy to maintain stability. They kept the elite and nobility in check through both political and religious means. High-ranking officials and military leaders were expected to uphold the divine will of the king, and any disloyalty could be met with both political and divine consequences. Religious festivals and rituals were also an opportunity for the people to express loyalty to the king and the gods, reinforcing the sense of unity and devotion that underpinned Hittite society. In conclusion, the Hittite Empire's success was not only due to its military strength and strategic conquests, but also because of its ability to balance religion, diplomacy, and governance. The intertwined nature of these elements allowed the Hittites to maintain stability and power over a vast empire. As we move forward in our exploration of the Hittite Empire's rise and eventual fall, we'll see how the complexities of their religious and diplomatic systems helped shape the fate of the empire, influencing its interactions with both allies and enemies alike. 11. The Battle of Kadesh, 1274 BCE. The peak of Hittite power. One of the defining moments in the history of the Hittite Empire occurred in 1274 BCE, when the Hittites faced off against Egypt in the famous Battle of Kadesh. This battle, fought on the banks of the Orontes River in modern-day Syria, was not just a military confrontation, but a defining moment that would shape the future of the ancient Near East. While the battle itself did not result in a decisive victory for either side, it was a turning point in the Hittite-Egyptian rivalry, marking the peak of Hittite power and the beginning of a new era in international diplomacy. The battle was fought between the forces of the Hittite Empire, led by King Muwatalli II, and the Egyptian forces commanded by Pharaoh Ramses II. The two powers were vying for control over the strategically important region of Syria, a land rich in resources and trade routes. Kadesh, a city located in northern Syria, was a key prize in this conflict, and both sides sought to control it to maintain dominance in the region. The Egyptian and Hittite forces met near Kadesh, each preparing for battle with a strategy that reflected their respective military strengths. Ramses II, renowned for his military prowess, had an army of around 20,000 men, including chariots, infantry, and archers. Muwatalli II, on the other hand, commanded a much larger force estimated at $40,000 to 50,000 troops, including an elite chariot corps that was central to the Hittite military strategy. Despite the Hittites' numerical superiority, the outcome of the battle was far from certain. In the early stages of the battle, Ramses II's forces were caught off guard when the Hittites launched a surprise attack, catching the Egyptian army in a vulnerable position. The Egyptian chariots were initially overwhelmed by the Hittite forces, and Ramses II's position seemed precarious. According to Egyptian accounts, Ramses II was nearly surrounded by Hittite forces, and it appeared as though his army might be defeated. However, Ramses II was able to rally his forces and ultimately turned the tide of the battle. Egyptian reinforcements arrived in time to help push back the Hittites, and both sides retreated after a prolonged and bloody struggle. While neither side claimed a definitive victory, the battle did not result in a Hittite defeat, and the Hittites were able to hold on to their territory in the region. The aftermath of the Battle of Kadesh was just as significant as the battle itself. Both Ramses II and Muwatalli II claimed victory, with each side producing their own accounts of the battle. The Egyptians celebrated the battle as a triumph, with Ramses II commissioning numerous inscriptions and reliefs that depicted his heroic actions during the battle. On the other hand, the Hittites also portrayed the battle as a success, emphasizing their ability to resist Egyptian advances and maintain control over their territory. Despite the lack of a clear military victory, the Battle of Kadesh marked a significant shift in the relationship between the two powers. Recognizing the futility of continued warfare and the heavy losses suffered by both sides, Ramses II and Muwatalli II agreed to negotiate a peace treaty. This treaty, known as the Treaty of Kadesh, is one of the oldest known peace accords in recorded history. The Treaty of Kadesh was not just a military or political agreement. It was a diplomatic masterpiece that demonstrated the sophisticated statecraft of both empires. The treaty outlined the terms of peace, the exchange of prisoners, and the recognition of each side's territorial claims. It also included a mutual defense pact, ensuring that the two powers would come to each other's aid in the event of a third-party attack. The treaty was a remarkable achievement, as it established a framework for cooperation between two of the most powerful empires in the ancient world. The peace treaty between Egypt and the Hittites marked the beginning of a new era in international relations. The Hittites and Egyptians, once bitter rivals, now recognized the value of diplomacy and mutual respect. The treaty not only ended the conflict between the two powers, but also paved the way for future alliances, including the establishment of marriages between Egyptian and Hittite royal families. For the Hittites, the Treaty of Kadesh represented the peak of their power and influence in the ancient Near East. The Hittite Empire, having successfully defended its territory and secured peace with Egypt, stood as a dominant force in the region. The military strength and diplomatic acumen demonstrated by Muwatalli II and his successors helped cement the Hittites' status as one of the great powers of the ancient world. However, the Treaty of Kadesh also foreshadowed the challenges that the Hittites would face in the years to come. Despite the peace, the Hittite Empire was constantly under threat from external forces, including the growing power of the Assyrians and the incursions of the Sea Peoples. Internal political instability and the eventual fragmentation of the empire would undermine the Hittites' ability to maintain their dominance. The Battle of Kadesh, while not resulting in a clear victory for either side, remains one of the most significant events in ancient history. It marked the height of Hittite power and the beginning of a new chapter in diplomacy and international relations. As we continue to explore the rise and fall of the Hittite Empire, We will see how the consequences of this battle reverberated through the centuries, shaping the future of the Hittites and the wider ancient world. 12. The decline of the Hittite Empire. Internal struggles and external pressures. The Hittite Empire, once at the height of its power and influence, faced a slow but inevitable decline in the centuries following the Treaty of Kadesh. While the Hittites had secured peace with Egypt and expanded their territory through military and diplomatic successes, internal struggles, external pressures, and shifting alliances would eventually fracture the empire. The seeds of decline were planted long before the empire fell, and the forces that undermined the Hittites' once dominant position in the ancient world were multifaceted. Internally, the Hittite Empire faced political instability that weakened its ability to maintain control over its vast territories. The monarchy, which had been a central and powerful institution during the empire's peak, began to experience challenges from within. Successive kings, many of whom lacked the strategic acumen and diplomatic skill of their predecessors, struggled to maintain control over a diverse and sprawling empire. Political infighting, royal succession crises, and a lack of strong leadership led to instability, which made the Hittite Empire vulnerable to both external and internal threats. One of the key factors contributing to the internal decline of the Hittite Empire was the fragmentation of its once unified territories. As the empire expanded, it became more difficult to manage the various provinces and regions that had been conquered. The central authority in Hattusa, the capital, struggled to maintain control over distant provinces, many of which had different cultures, languages, and customs. This decentralization of power created a weakening of the Hittite state, as local rulers became more autonomous and less willing to submit to the central monarchy. Rebellions and uprisings were not uncommon during this period, further destabilizing the empire. Externally, the Hittites faced increasing pressure from neighboring powers, many of whom were eager to take advantage of the Hittites' weakened state. The growing power of the Assyrians in particular posed a significant threat to the Hittites. The Assyrians, with their powerful military and expanding empire, had long been rivals of the Hittites, and their ambitions for domination in the region directly clashed with the Hittites' territorial interests. As the Hittite Empire became more fragmented, the Assyrians launched military campaigns aimed at expanding their influence in Anatolia and the surrounding areas. The Hittites, no longer able to muster the strength to resist such threats, gradually lost ground to the Assyrians. In addition to the Assyrians, the mysterious Sea Peoples, a coalition of seafaring raiders, posed a grave threat to the entire ancient Near East during the 12th century BCE. These groups, whose origins remain largely unknown, attacked numerous coastal and inland regions, including Hittite territories. The Sea Peoples were responsible for devastating several ancient civilizations, and their raids significantly impacted the Hittite Empire. The Hittites, already weakened by internal conflict and external threats, struggled to defend their borders from these marauding invaders. The combined pressure from the Assyrians, the Sea Peoples, and internal rebellion proved too much for the Hittite Empire to withstand. Around 1200 BCE, Hattusa, the once thriving capital of the Hittite Empire, was sacked and abandoned. The exact causes of the fall of Hattusa remain unclear, but it is likely that the city's destruction was the result of a combination of external invasions, internal unrest, and the weakening of central authority. The city, which had been the heart of Hittite power and culture, was left in ruins, signaling the collapse of the Hittite Empire. Following the fall of Hattusa, the Hittite Empire fractured into smaller city-states known as the Neo-Hittite states. These smaller kingdoms, such as Carchemish Tabal and Patan, were remnants of the once great empire, but lacked the unity and strength to reassert the Hittite dominance in the region. While these Neo-Hittite states continued to survive for a time, they were never able to regain the power and influence that the Hittites had once enjoyed. The region became increasingly vulnerable to the expansion of the Assyrians and other emerging powers. The decline of the Hittite Empire then was a result of multiple factors, both internal and external. Politically, the empire had become too large and too fragmented to maintain its cohesion. The weakening of the monarchy and the rise of regional elites contributed to the decline of central authority, leaving the Hittites susceptible to outside invasions and internal revolts. Economically, the empire's reliance on trade and resources from its vast territories became a double-edged sword. When these regions became unstable or lost to invaders, the Hittites were left without the wealth necessary to sustain their military and political power. The rise of powerful neighbors, particularly the Assyrians, and the unpredictable raids of the Sea Peoples, further compounded the Hittites' vulnerability. As these external pressures intensified, the Hittites struggled to mount effective resistance, and their empire slowly disintegrated. The fall of the Hittite Empire was not a sudden event, but a gradual process that unfolded over several decades. The once mighty empire, which had dominated much of the ancient Near East, was reduced to smaller, weaker city-states, each struggling to survive in a world that was becoming increasingly hostile. The Hittite people, who had once been known for their military strength, advanced legal systems, and vibrant culture, saw their empire crumble under the weight of internal divisions and external pressures. The legacy of the Hittite Empire, however, was not lost. Despite the collapse of the empire itself, the Hittites left an enduring impact on the ancient world. Their contributions to military strategy, law, and culture influenced subsequent civilizations, particularly the Neo-Assyrian Empire, which would go on to dominate the region. Additionally, the Hittites' role in the development of ironworking and their diplomatic achievements, such as the Treaty of Kadesh, continued to be referenced by later generations. As we continue our exploration of the Hittite Empire's rise and fall, we will see how their legacy persisted through the smaller Neo-Hittite states and the influence they exerted on the civilizations that came after them. 13. The fall of Hattusa. The destruction of the capital, 1200 BCE. The destruction of Hattusa, the proud capital of the Hittite Empire, marked the final collapse of the once mighty civilization. Hattusa had stood as the beating heart of the Hittite kingdom for centuries, its imposing city walls, towering gates, and intricate temples a testament to the empire's power and wealth. Yet by 1200 BCE, the city, along with the empire itself, was reduced to ruins. The exact causes of the fall of Hattusa remain a subject of debate among historians and archaeologists. Some theories suggest that it was the result of a siege, while others point to the growing internal instability within the Hittite Empire. The Hittites' weakening central authority, coupled with external invasions, created a perfect storm for the city's downfall. One of the most widely accepted theories is that the destruction of Hattusa was linked to the incursions of the Sea Peoples. These mysterious groups of raiders, whose exact origins remain unclear, were responsible for widespread destruction across the eastern Mediterranean during the Late Bronze Age. The Sea Peoples attacked multiple cities, including Hattusa, and their raids are believed to have contributed significantly to the collapse of several ancient civilizations, including the Hittites. Hattusa's strategic location, while advantageous for its growth and prosperity, also made it vulnerable to attack. The city was situated in a region surrounded by hostile forces, including the Assyrians and the Sea Peoples. As the Hittite Empire weakened internally with rebellious provinces and a lack of strong leadership, the city's defenses were no longer sufficient to repel the growing number of invaders. The combination of external pressures and internal strife likely contributed to the eventual sacking of Hattusa. The fall of Hattusa itself was a dramatic event. Archaeological evidence shows that the city was burned, and many of its buildings were destroyed in the aftermath. Large sections of the city walls, which had once been a symbol of the Hittites' military strength, were toppled. The royal palaces and temples that had adorned Hattusa were looted and set ablaze. The destruction was so complete that it took centuries for the city to be resettled, and even then it was never again the thriving metropolis it once was. While the destruction of Hattusa marked the end of the Hittite Empire as a political entity, the collapse of the capital had far-reaching consequences for the wider region. As the Hittite state disintegrated, the empire's once vast territories fractured into smaller city-states known as the Neo-Hittite states. These smaller kingdoms continued to exist for some time, but without the unity and strength of the former empire, they were much more vulnerable to foreign invasion and internal conflict. The Neo-Hittite states, though, composed of former Hittite lands, lacked the cohesion and centralization that had made the Hittite Empire so powerful. They became fragmented, with each city-state pursuing its own interests and often engaging in conflict with one another. This fragmentation made it easier for the rising power of the Assyrians to gradually dominate the region. The fall of Hattusa and the subsequent collapse of the Hittite Empire also marked the end of an era in the ancient Near East. The Hittites had been one of the dominant powers in the region, but their downfall, along with the fall of other great civilizations, such as Mycenaean Greece and the Egyptian New Kingdom, ushered in a period of upheaval and transformation. Yet despite the destruction of their capital and the eventual disintegration of their empire, the legacy of the Hittites did not entirely vanish. The Hittites' cultural and military innovations continued to influence subsequent civilizations, particularly the Assyrians, who adopted many Hittite military strategies and governance systems. The Hittites' contributions to diplomacy, as seen in the Treaty of Kadesh, also left a lasting impact on international relations and treaties in the ancient world. In addition, the Hittites' legacy lived on through their technological and cultural achievements. Their advancements in ironworking, which were crucial to their military dominance, would be passed down to future generations. The Hittites were among the first to successfully smelt and forge iron, and this knowledge would eventually spread to other cultures, significantly impacting the development of weapons and tools throughout the ancient world. Moreover, the Hittites' legal codes and systems of governance influenced later civilizations, particularly those in the Near East. The Hittite laws, with their emphasis on fairness and justice, served as a model for later legal systems, including those of the Assyrians and Persians. The physical ruins of Hattusa, though abandoned and destroyed, also continue to serve as a symbol of the Hittites' former glory. Archaeological excavations have uncovered valuable insights into Hittite society, revealing intricate pottery sculptures and inscriptions that help historians understand the daily life, culture, and achievements of the Hittites. In the end, the fall of Hattusa and the collapse of the Hittite Empire mark the end of one of the great ancient civilizations, but the echoes of their influence can still be felt today. Their story is one of rise and fall, of ambition, conquest, and eventual decline. Yet it is also a story of resilience and legacy, as the Hittites' contributions to military strategy, diplomacy, and culture continue to shape the ancient world's history. 14. The aftermath. The fragmentation of the Hittite world. After the fall of Hattusa in 1200 BCE, the once unified Hittite Empire crumbled, leaving behind a fragmented world of smaller city-states. The mighty empire that had stretched from Anatolia to Syria and Mesopotamia was no more, and what followed was a period of chaos and transformation. The Hittite world, once ruled from a central authority, splintered into independent Neo-Hittite kingdoms that struggled to survive in a rapidly changing and increasingly hostile environment. These smaller city-states, which retained the legacy of the Hittite culture, were located in modern-day southeastern Turkey, northern Syria, and parts of northern Iraq. Among the most notable of these Neo-Hittite states were Carchemish Tabal and Patun. While they were technically the successors to the Hittite Empire, each of these states functioned as independent entities with their own rulers, military forces, and territorial ambitions. They were never able to reclaim the political unity or power of the former Hittite Empire. The fragmentation of the Hittite world came with a significant loss of influence. The powerful centralized governance that had allowed the Hittites to dominate their region was gone. The powerful Hittite kings who had once controlled vast territories were replaced by local rulers who often had to contend with internal rebellion and external threats. Many of these city-states engaged in constant conflicts with each other over land resources and power. The once cohesive Hittite society was now divided into competing factions with no unified effort to resist outside invasions. In the wake of the Hittite Empire's collapse, the Assyrian Empire emerged as the dominant power in the region. The Assyrians, known for their military prowess and expansionist ambitions, took advantage of the Hittite disintegration, gradually absorbing much of the territory that had once belonged to the Hittites. The Neo-Hittite states, which were already weakened by internal strife, had little power to resist the Assyrian onslaught. By the 9th century BCE, the Assyrians had conquered many of the Neo-Hittite kingdoms, bringing an end to the Hittite presence in Anatolia and northern Syria. The kingdom of Carchemish, one of the last remaining Hittite-ruled cities, was eventually destroyed by the Assyrians in 717 BCE. As the Assyrian Empire grew in power, the remnants of the Hittite world were absorbed into its vast territory, marking the final end of the Hittite political legacy in the region. The destruction of Hattusa and the subsequent fragmentation of the Hittite Empire also had profound effects on the region's cultural and social landscape. While the Neo-Hittite states retained many elements of Hittite culture, including language, religion, and art, these smaller kingdoms lacked the resources to maintain the grandeur of the empire that had come before. The cultural achievements of the Hittites were diluted as these city-states became increasingly isolated, each developing its own local customs and traditions. The once unified Hittite identity began to fade, and the region's cultures became more influenced by their new Assyrian overlords. Despite the loss of political power, Hittite culture left a lasting imprint on the ancient world. Many of the smaller Neo-Hittite states continued to use the Hittite language in their inscriptions, and the Hittite gods and religious practices were preserved for centuries. The Hittites' advances in law, military strategy, and ironworking also continued to influence their neighbors, particularly the Assyrians, who inherited many Hittite military innovations. The Neo-Hittite states were not completely erased, however. Some, like Carchemish, survived for several more centuries, albeit under Assyrian control. In fact, the last remnants of Hittite culture persisted even into the first millennium BCE. The Hittites' influence on later civilizations, especially in the realm of military strategy and iron production, can be traced through the rise of the Neo-Assyrian Empire and beyond. Though the Hittite Empire itself had disappeared, the legacy of their language, legal codes, and military techniques continued to affect the ancient Near East for centuries. The impact of the Hittite civilization extended far beyond its political fall, influencing later powers such as the Phrygians, Luwians, and even the early Greeks. Through their innovations in law and warfare, the Hittites helped shape the future of the ancient world. The fragmentation of the Hittite world also highlights the challenges faced by ancient empires in the aftermath of collapse. While the Hittites were able to conquer and dominate vast territories, they ultimately succumbed to a combination of internal division, external invasions, and the inability to maintain political unity. The fall of the Hittite Empire serves as a poignant reminder of how even the greatest empires can falter when faced with a confluence of internal and external pressures. As we reflect on the Hittite Empire's rise and fall, we see how their cultural and military legacy lived on long after their political collapse. Despite the fragmentation of their world and the loss of their territory, the Hittites' influence on the ancient Near East remained profound, shaping the civilizations that followed them and contributing to the rich tapestry of history in the region. 15. The end of the Hittites. The role of the Sea Peoples and foreign invasions. The collapse of the Hittite Empire did not come as a single cataclysmic event. Instead, it was the result of a slow unraveling spurred by both internal weaknesses and external pressures that ultimately proved too great to withstand. Among the most significant external factors contributing to the fall of the Hittites were the invasions by the Sea Peoples, an enigmatic group of marauders whose origins remain shrouded in mystery, but whose impact on the ancient world was profound. Their invasions, along with the rise of other foreign powers, hastened the demise of the once mighty Hittite Empire. The Sea Peoples were a coalition of seafaring raiders who attacked several key civilizations of the eastern Mediterranean during the late Bronze Age. These groups, which included the Philistines, the Shurden, and others, are often depicted in Egyptian records as a formidable threat. The exact identity of the Sea Peoples remains unclear as their origins are not well documented, but their raids disrupted many of the established powers in the region, including the Hittites. In the case of the Hittites, the Sea Peoples struck at a time when the empire was already weakened by internal strife and external threats. By the late 13th century BCE, the once powerful Hittite central authority had begun to fragment, and many of the once loyal Neo-Hittite city-states were becoming increasingly vulnerable. These cities, including Hattusa, had already suffered from internal rebellions and growing economic instability. The Hittites had also been fighting on multiple fronts against the Assyrians, the Egyptians, and the growing threat of the Sea Peoples. The Sea Peoples, notorious for their skill in naval warfare, overwhelmed many coastal cities and inland regions, including those under Hittite control. They attacked from the sea, which made it difficult for the Hittites to defend their cities, many of which were situated near the coast or along important trade routes. The Sea Peoples' raids caused widespread destruction, destabilizing the Hittite world and leading to the abandonment of cities, including Hattusa. Archaeological evidence suggests that the city was destroyed by fire, possibly in a raid orchestrated by the Sea Peoples. The devastating impact of these invasions, combined with the Hittites' own internal political turmoil, sealed the fate of the empire. The Sea Peoples were not the only external threat the Hittites faced. The rise of the Neo-Assyrian Empire to the east also contributed to the empire's decline. The Assyrians, known for their military prowess and ruthless expansionist ambitions, sought to absorb the territories once held by the Hittites. By the 9th century BCE, the Assyrians began their aggressive campaigns into former Hittite territory, including areas like Anatolia and northern Syria. This added pressure on the already weakened Hittite states, hastening their disintegration. Furthermore, the collapse of the Hittite Empire occurred during a period of widespread upheaval across the eastern Mediterranean, known as the Late Bronze Age collapse. This was a time when many great civilizations, such as the Mycenaeans, the Egyptians, and the Hittites, suffered from invasions, internal rebellion, and economic collapse. The Sea Peoples were part of this larger wave of destruction, but their specific role in the fall of the Hittites remains critical. As the Hittite Empire fractured and its regional power waned, the once unified territories were divided into smaller independent kingdoms, known as the Neo-Hittite states. These city-states, though they retained much of Hittite culture and identity, were no longer capable of challenging the growing power of Assyria or other external forces. These smaller kingdoms became easy targets for conquest, as they lacked the military strength and political unity that had once made the Hittite Empire so formidable. The fall of the Hittites was not immediate, and it is important to note that some Neo-Hittite states managed to survive for a while after the collapse of the empire. However, these kingdoms were often beset by external invasions and internal instability, making their survival increasingly difficult. The Assyrians under kings such as Tiglath-Pileser III and Sargon II steadily absorbed the remnants of the Hittite world, wiping out what remained of Hittite power by the 7th century BCE. Even though the Hittites themselves vanished as a political force, their cultural and technological contributions were far from erased. The legacy of the Hittites lived on through their influence on later civilizations, especially the Assyrians. The Hittites' military strategies, particularly their use of chariots, were adopted by their Assyrian successors. Additionally, the Hittites' advancements in ironworking legal systems and governance would continue to shape the ancient world long after their political collapse. The mysterious sea peoples who were instrumental in the final blow to the Hittite Empire also left behind a complex legacy. While they contributed to the fall of many great civilizations, including the Hittites, they also became part of the historical record through their interactions with the ancient powers of the Mediterranean. The sea peoples were eventually absorbed into the civilizations they had raided, leaving behind a complex and debated legacy. While we may never fully understand their origins or the full extent of their impact, their role in the decline of the Hittite Empire is undeniable. In conclusion, the end of the Hittite Empire was a result of a combination of internal weaknesses and external invasions. The rise of the Assyrians, the marauding sea peoples, and the Hittites' own political fragmentation contributed to the empire's collapse. Yet even in its fall, the Hittites' legacy endured. Their military innovations, legal systems, and contributions to ironworking lived on, influencing the ancient world long after the empire crumbled. As we move forward, we will explore how the influence of the Hittites continued to resonate through the smaller Neo-Hittite states and beyond. 16. Hittite legacy influence on later civilizations. While the Hittite Empire collapsed in the 12th century BCE, its influence on the ancient world endured long after the empire itself was gone. The remnants of Hittite culture, technology, military strategies, and legal frameworks left an indelible mark on the civilizations that came after them, including the Neo-Assyrian Empire and even the ancient Greeks. The Hittites, despite their eventual demise, had contributed significantly to the cultural and political evolution of the ancient Near East. One of the most lasting contributions of the Hittites was in the realm of military strategy. The Hittite chariotry, already a powerful force during their peak, influenced subsequent civilizations, particularly the Assyrians. The Hittites were among the first to harness the power of the chariot for military purposes, and their expertise in the use of chariots was passed on to their neighbors. The Assyrians in particular adopted many of the Hittites' tactics and chariot designs, enhancing their own military prowess. As a result, the Hittite innovations in chariot warfare helped shape the strategies of future empires, including the Neo-Assyrians, who would become one of the most powerful military forces in the ancient world. Another significant aspect of Hittite legacy was their advancements in metallurgy, particularly their pioneering use of iron. The Hittites were one of the first civilizations to develop iron-working techniques that allowed them to produce stronger and more durable weapons and tools. This innovation gave them a significant military advantage and would later influence the development of ironworking in other cultures. After the fall of the Hittite Empire, their ironworking techniques were passed down to neighboring peoples, including the Phrygians and the Greeks, who built upon the Hittite foundation to further advance their own metalworking capabilities. Hittite legal systems also had a lasting impact. The Hittites' legal codes, which were among the most advanced of the ancient world, provided a model for later civilizations. The Hittites codified laws related to property rights, family law, and criminal justice, laying the groundwork for legal systems in other empires, including those of the Assyrians and the Persians. The Hittite legal framework emphasized fairness and justice with detailed provisions for dealing with theft, murder, and other crimes. Some of the legal principles enshrined by the Hittites would influence the development of legal systems in the ancient world for centuries. In addition to military and legal innovations, the Hittites also played a key role in shaping diplomatic relations between neighboring powers. The Treaty of Kadesh, signed between the Hittites and the Egyptians in 1274 BCE, is often cited as one of the first known international peace treaties. This treaty not only ended the hostilities between the two powerful empires, but also established a framework for diplomatic relations, including mutual defense pacts and the exchange of prisoners. The Hittites' emphasis on diplomacy, particularly through treaties, would influence the diplomatic practices of later empires, including the Assyrians and the Persians. Culturally, the Hittites left behind a rich legacy of art, architecture, and literature. While much of Hittite literature has been lost to time, what remains reveals a civilization with a deep appreciation for storytelling and myth. The Hittite epic, the Song of Ulikumi, for example, tells the story of a great battle between the gods and a monstrous figure. This epic, along with other Hittite texts, provides insight into their worldview, religious beliefs, and cultural practices. The Hittites also left behind impressive works of art, including detailed reliefs and sculptures that adorned their temples and palaces. These artistic achievements were later admired and emulated by neighboring civilizations, particularly the Assyrians. The Hittites' architectural achievements, particularly their construction of fortified cities, also had a lasting impact. The city of Hattusa, with its imposing walls, monumental gates, and complex layout, remains a remarkable example of Hittite engineering and urban planning. Many of the techniques used in Hattusa's construction, such as the use of massive stones and intricate drainage systems, would later be adopted by other ancient cultures, including the Assyrians and the Persians. Furthermore, the Hittites played a significant role in the development of the alphabet. While the Hittites themselves did not create the alphabet, they adopted and adapted the cuneiform writing system used by the Babylonians and developed their own form of writing, which was used to record royal decrees, treaties, and religious texts. This form of writing would later influence the development of alphabetic scripts, which would become the foundation of many modern writing systems. The Hittites' religious beliefs also left a lasting impact on the ancient world. Their pantheon of gods, particularly Tarhunt, the storm god, and Araniti, the sun goddess, influenced the religious practices of their neighbors, including the Phrygians and the Luwians. The Hittites' religious rituals, which emphasized sacrifice and offerings to the gods, also had an enduring influence on the religious practices of later civilizations in the region. Though the Hittite Empire itself fell into decline and fragmentation, the legacy of the Hittites continued to shape the ancient Near East for centuries. Their contributions to military strategy, ironworking law, diplomacy, art, architecture, and religion helped to lay the foundation for the rise of future empires, including the Assyrian, Babylonian, and Persian empires. The Hittites' influence was felt far beyond their political borders, and their innovations continued to resonate long after their empire had fallen. In many ways, the Hittites were ahead of their time. Their ability to combine military strength with diplomacy, their innovations in technology and law, and their lasting cultural contributions all left an indelible mark on the ancient world. While their empire may have crumbled, the legacy of the Hittites endured, influencing the course of history for generations to come. 17. Hittite discoveries and archaeology. The fall of the Hittite Empire may have ended the civilization's political dominance, but the Hittites would not be forgotten. Over the centuries, their achievements were buried under layers of time until the 19th and 20th centuries, when archaeology would breathe life back into their story. The discovery of Hittite ruins, inscriptions, and artifacts revealed a civilization once lost to history. Today, Hittite archaeology stands as a window into one of the most sophisticated and influential empires of the ancient Near East. The first major breakthrough in Hittite archaeology came in the early 1900s when the ruins of Hattusa were uncovered. Hattusa, the Hittite capital, had long been abandoned, its location forgotten. In 1834, British explorer Charles Fellows was the first to identify the ancient city of Hattusa. But it wasn't until German archaeologists led by Hugo Winkler began excavations in the early 20th century that the full extent of the Hittite civilization was revealed. The ruins of Hattusa, including its grand city walls, monumental gates, and the royal palace, gave archaeologists a glimpse into the grandeur of the Hittite Empire. The discovery of Hattusa was just the beginning. Throughout the 20th century, more Hittite sites were uncovered across Anatolia, including the cities of Alaka Hoyuk Yazilakaya and Boğazköy. These excavations revealed an astonishing wealth of artifacts, from inscribed tablets to intricate pottery weapons and sculptures. The artifacts uncovered at these sites have provided vital insight into Hittite culture, military practices, art, religion, and daily life. One of the most significant discoveries came in the form of Hittite inscriptions. These inscriptions, carved into stone tablets, walls, and pillars, provided an invaluable record of Hittite history, politics, and religion. Many of these inscriptions were written in Hittite cuneiform, a script borrowed from the Babylonians but adapted by the Hittites to suit their own language. The decipherment of these inscriptions in the early 20th century opened a new chapter in understanding the Hittite civilization. The Hittites' legal and administrative records in particular provided insight into their governance and social structure. The famous Hittite laws were among the most detailed legal codes of the ancient world, providing a glimpse into the Hittites' views on justice, property, marriage, and criminal punishment. These laws were inscribed on clay tablets and used to regulate daily life, demonstrating the sophistication of the Hittite state. The surviving legal texts are a testament to the Hittites' commitment to law and order and have become a key source for scholars studying ancient legal systems. In addition to legal and administrative records, the archaeological discoveries of Hittite religious practices have also shed light on the civilization's spiritual life. Temples and altars dedicated to the storm god Tarhunt, the sun goddess Araniti, and other deities have been uncovered at Hattusa and other Hittite sites. These temples, often adorned with intricate carvings and statues, provide evidence of the Hittites' complex religious rituals, which involved sacrifices, offerings, and prayers to ensure divine favor. One of the most famous archaeological sites associated with the Hittites is Yazilakaya, a rock sanctuary located near Hattusa. Yazilakaya is home to a series of relief carvings depicting Hittite gods and goddesses, as well as royal figures engaged in religious ceremonies. These carvings offer a rare and valuable insight into the religious beliefs and practices of the Hittites. The sanctuary is considered one of the most important Hittite religious sites and provides an extraordinary glimpse into the spiritual world of the Hittite elite. As scholars continued to uncover Hittite artifacts, they also began to decipher the Hittite language which had been preserved in the inscriptions. The Hittite language, an early Indo-European language, was long a mystery to linguists. However, through the careful analysis of cuneiform tablets, scholars were able to identify the structure and vocabulary of the language. The decipherment of Hittite cuneiform provided a wealth of information about the civilization's politics, culture, and economy. It also allowed scholars to understand the complex relationships between the Hittites and their neighbors, including the Egyptians, Assyrians, and Babylonians. Archaeological discoveries have also provided insight into the Hittites' military innovations. Weapons armor and chariot fittings uncovered in Hittite tombs and battlefields have shown the advanced technology used by the Hittites in warfare. The Hittites were one of the first civilizations to use iron in their weapons, and their ironworking techniques were crucial to their military dominance. The discovery of Hittite chariot fittings, along with depictions of chariots in Hittite art, has confirmed the central role of the chariot in Hittite warfare. The Hittite army, with its highly trained chariot corps, was one of the most formidable military forces of its time. In addition to military artifacts, archaeological excavations have uncovered numerous everyday objects that provide insight into Hittite daily life. These objects include pottery tools, jewelry, and household items, many of which reveal the artistic and practical skills of the Hittite people. Pottery in particular was an important craft in Hittite society, with distinctive Hittite designs and motifs found in homes and temples. The art of pottery making was not only a functional practice, but also an expression of Hittite culture, and the intricate designs on their pottery reflect the sophistication of their society. Despite the impressive discoveries made by archaeologists, there is still much that remains unknown about the Hittites. Their exact relationship with the Sea Peoples and the reasons behind the fall of their capital city, Hattusa, remain topics of debate. Moreover, many of the Hittites' cultural achievements, such as their literature and music, have been lost to time. However, what remains is a civilization that left a lasting impact on the ancient world and continues to be a subject of fascination and study. In conclusion, the discoveries made by archaeologists have breathed new life into the history of the Hittite Empire. Through their work, we have gained a deeper understanding of the Hittites' political structure, military prowess, religious practices, and daily life. The Hittite Empire may have fallen, but the legacy of its achievements continues to resonate in the modern world. Their contributions to law, diplomacy, art, and military strategy helped shape the future of the ancient Near East and continue to influence our understanding of ancient civilizations. 18. The Hittite Empire's influence on modern culture and scholarship. The Hittite Empire, though long gone, continues to shape our understanding of the ancient world. Its legacy lives on not only through its tangible contributions to the civilizations that followed, but also through the modern scholarship that has brought new perspectives on the empire's history, culture, and impact. While the Hittites themselves were absorbed by the expanding Assyrian Empire and their political power faded, their innovations in law, diplomacy, military strategy, and technology have influenced generations of historians, archaeologists, and cultural scholars. In the academic world, the Hittites are often regarded as one of the most sophisticated civilizations of the ancient Near East. Through archaeology, linguistics, and historical research, scholars have been able to piece together the lives and achievements of the Hittites, offering invaluable insights into the political, social, and cultural practices of one of the ancient world's most enigmatic civilizations. The rediscovery of their written language, for example, has allowed modern scholars to access a vast array of historical records that provide a detailed account of Hittite society. The decipherment of Hittite cuneiform, particularly in the early 20th century, was a major breakthrough in the study of the ancient world. By analyzing cuneiform tablets found in Hattusa and other Hittite sites, scholars have uncovered an extensive archive of royal decrees, treaties, legal codes, and religious texts. These texts have provided a wealth of information on Hittite politics, military campaigns, trade, and even their legal system. The Hittites' emphasis on codifying laws and maintaining written records was a significant achievement and their legal practices have been studied by historians and legal scholars around the world. One of the most important contributions of the Hittites to modern scholarship is their diplomatic legacy. The Treaty of Kadesh, signed between the Hittites and Egyptians around 1274 BCE, is considered one of the earliest examples of international diplomacy and treaty-making. This agreement, which marked the end of hostilities between the two great powers, established a framework for peace and cooperation that would influence diplomatic practices for centuries to come. The Treaty of Kadesh not only highlights the importance of diplomacy in the ancient world, but also serves as an early example of how treaties could be used to prevent conflicts and ensure mutual security between rival states. In addition to their diplomatic contributions, the Hittites are recognized for their advancements in military strategy. The Hittites were pioneers in the use of chariots in warfare, and their military innovations were adopted by neighboring civilizations, particularly the Assyrians. The chariot was a powerful weapon in the ancient world, and the Hittites' expertise in chariot warfare gave them a significant advantage on the battlefield. Their influence on military tactics and organization can be seen in the subsequent developments of military forces throughout the ancient Near East. Moreover, the Hittites' contribution to ironworking continues to resonate in modern times. As one of the first civilizations to develop advanced iron smelting techniques, the Hittites played a crucial role in the eventual widespread use of iron in weapons tools and other essential items. Iron would go on to revolutionize industries across the ancient world, and the Hittites' early mastery of the material laid the groundwork for its future use in other empires, including the Romans and later medieval societies. The Hittites' impact on art, architecture, and culture is also noteworthy. The grand palaces, temples, and fortifications they built continue to awe modern-day visitors and scholars alike. The most famous of these structures is the city of Hattusa, whose massive stone walls and intricately designed gates stand as a testament to Hittite architectural ingenuity. These architectural feats, combined with their rich artistic legacy, have left a lasting imprint on the way we understand the aesthetic values of the ancient Near East. Hittite literature, though limited in surviving works, has provided scholars with a fascinating glimpse into the culture and worldview of the empire. The Song of Ullikummi. A religious epic is one of the most important literary works to have survived from the Hittites. Through such works, scholars have been able to explore the mythology, religious beliefs, and societal norms of the Hittite people. Their literature not only serves as an expression of artistic creativity, but also offers valuable insights into the intellectual and spiritual life of one of the ancient world's most powerful empires. In addition to their direct contributions, the study of the Hittites has influenced our broader understanding of ancient history. The Hittites were a key part of the intricate web of civilizations that shaped the ancient Near East, and their interactions with Egypt, Mesopotamia, and the Levant were crucial to the development of the ancient world. By studying the Hittites, historians have been able to gain a better understanding of how ancient civilizations interacted with one another, how cultures exchanged ideas, and how power dynamics shifted in the region over time. The Hittites' impact is not confined to the ancient world alone. Their story continues to inspire modern historians, archaeologists, and even writers and filmmakers. The fascination with the Hittites, their rise to power, and their eventual fall continues to fuel scholarly debates and popular culture. From academic studies to popular media, the Hittites' legacy endures as a testament to the complexity and richness of ancient civilizations. As we reflect on the lasting impact of the Hittite Empire, we see how their innovations in law, diplomacy, military strategy, and technology have shaped the course of history. While the empire itself may have fallen, its contributions to the ancient world and modern scholarship continue to inspire and inform our understanding of the past. The Hittites' legacy is a reminder of the enduring power of human achievement and the lasting influence of ancient civilizations on the world today. 19. The Hittites in mythology and popular imagination. While the Hittite Empire faded from history with its eventual collapse, its mythological and cultural legacy lives on in modern popular imagination. The mystique surrounding the Hittites, one of the ancient world's most powerful yet enigmatic civilizations, has inspired both historical scholars and creators of fiction throughout the centuries. From the discovery of their ruins to their portrayal in contemporary media, the Hittites continue to captivate the minds of many, offering an intriguing window into the past. The Hittites were known for their rich mythology, which played an integral role in their religion and culture. Their pantheon of gods and goddesses, including Tarhunt, the storm god, and Araniti, the sun goddess, formed the spiritual foundation of the empire. Hittite mythology was filled with vivid stories of divine struggles, the power of nature, and the relationships between gods and humans. These stories not only shaped the Hittite worldview, but also provided a framework for understanding the forces that governed life, from weather patterns to the success or failure of military campaigns. The Hittite myth of Ullikummi, for example, is one of the most well-known pieces of Hittite literature. This epic poem tells the tale of a divine struggle between the gods and a monstrous being, and it highlights themes of cosmic order, power, and rebellion. Although the poem is incomplete, it has been preserved in fragments and remains a vital piece of Hittite mythology. The story is not just a religious narrative, but also a reflection of the Hittites' understanding of their place in the world, both in relation to the gods and to the other civilizations around them. For modern historians, these myths offer more than just entertainment or religious context. They provide insight into Hittite beliefs, values, and priorities. The role of the gods in Hittite society was not just theological, it was practical. Rulers and warriors often invoked the gods before embarking on military campaigns, and the fate of the empire was believed to be directly tied to divine favor. Understanding these myths gives us a deeper appreciation of the worldview that guided Hittite decision-making and their approach to governance, diplomacy, and war. However, the legacy of the Hittites does not only survive in ancient texts and religious practices. Their empire and its dramatic rise and fall has inspired numerous works of fiction and popular culture. The mystery surrounding the Hittites' disappearance, along with the striking archaeological discoveries of their ruins, has captured the imaginations of writers, filmmakers, and artists alike. The rediscovery of Hattusa, in particular, played a significant role in reigniting interest in the Hittites during the late 19th and early 20th centuries. As archaeologists uncovered the city's impressive walls, monumental gates, and sacred temples, the ruins became a symbol of ancient power and lost glory. The imposing city of Hattusa, with its grand scale and intricate architecture, suggested a civilization that had once stood at the pinnacle of the ancient world. This inspired numerous works of literature and historical fiction that sought to imagine the lives and struggles of the Hittites. Their story became a symbol of both the fleeting nature of empires and the grandeur of lost civilizations. In the world of popular culture, the Hittites have been depicted in various forms. From historical novels to movies, the mystique of the Hittites continues to provide rich material for creators who seek to explore ancient civilizations. The Hittites' interactions with other ancient powers, such as Egypt, Assyria, and the Sea Peoples, have been used as a backdrop for stories of intrigue, war, and diplomacy. Their advanced military strategies, particularly their chariotry and their role in the Treaty of Kadesh, have also provided inspiration for fictional portrayals of ancient warfare and diplomacy. One of the most famous examples of the Hittites' presence in modern media is their depiction in historical novels and films set in the ancient world. These portrayals often focus on the grandeur of Hittite society, from their impressive architecture and military might to their complex religious practices. While these works may take creative liberties, they help bring the story of the Hittites to a broader audience and highlight their lasting cultural impact. In addition to their portrayal in fiction, the Hittites also have a place in the world of academic scholarship. Historians and archaeologists have long been fascinated by the Hittites' military tactics, legal systems, and diplomatic strategies. Their use of diplomacy, exemplified by the Treaty of Kadesh, continues to be studied by scholars interested in the evolution of international relations. Similarly, their innovations in ironworking and law have made them a subject of study for those exploring the technological and societal developments of the ancient world. Even in modern times, the Hittites' role in shaping the ancient Near East cannot be overstated. Their empire, though short-lived in comparison to some of their neighbors, left a legacy that continues to resonate today. The Hittites' use of writing their legal codes, their artistic achievements, and their military innovations all contributed to the development of subsequent civilizations. From the Assyrians to the Greeks, the Hittites influenced the cultures and empires that followed. As we reflect on the Hittites' place in both history and popular imagination, it becomes clear that their legacy is one of both mystery and admiration. While much of their story has been lost to time, what remains is a civilization that contributed greatly to the shaping of the ancient world. The Hittites' influence, particularly in areas such as diplomacy, military strategy, and cultural exchange, continues to be felt long after their empire faded away. In modern scholarship, the fascination with the Hittites remains strong. New discoveries, ongoing research, and the continuing interpretation of Hittite texts continue to shed light on this once great civilization. And in the realm of popular culture, the Hittites remain a symbol of ancient power, intrigue, and mystery, an enduring reminder of the complexities and achievements of the ancient world. 20. The enduring legacy of the Hittite Empire. The rise and fall of the Hittite Empire is a story of ambition, power, and ultimately the fragility of even the greatest civilizations. At its peak, the Hittite Empire was a dominant force in the ancient Near East, controlling vast territories from Anatolia to northern Syria, wielding a powerful military, engaging in complex diplomacy, and leaving behind a profound cultural and technological legacy. But as with many empires throughout history, internal strife, external pressures, and the changing tides of power led to its decline and eventual collapse. The Hittite Empire's demise, however, should not overshadow its remarkable achievements and lasting influence on the ancient world. The Hittites were innovators in many fields, from military tactics to metalworking, from law to diplomacy. Their military prowess, particularly the use of chariots, set them apart from their contemporaries and influenced the armies of future empires, including the Assyrians. Their pioneering use of iron and their contributions to the development of ironworking had lasting effects on the region's technological advancements. In the realm of law and governance, the Hittites' legal codes were among the most advanced of the ancient world. Their system of justice, with its emphasis on fairness and accountability, laid the groundwork for legal systems in subsequent civilizations. The Hittites also made significant strides in diplomacy with the Treaty of Kadesh, standing as one of the earliest and most famous examples of international treaties, demonstrating the importance of negotiation and peace-building in the ancient world. Culturally, the Hittites left a rich legacy of art, literature, and architecture. Their impressive architectural feats, particularly the fortifications of Hattusa, remain a testament to their engineering skills. The Hittites' mythological stories and religious practices offer a glimpse into their worldview, and their art continues to captivate modern audiences, providing a visual connection to their ancient civilization. While the Hittite Empire fell in the 12th century BCE, its cultural and technological contributions were far from forgotten. Their influence on later civilizations, particularly the Assyrians, can be seen in the continued use of Hittite military strategies, the preservation of Hittite legal traditions, and the adoption of their ironworking techniques. Even after their political power had waned, the Hittites continued to shape the course of history through their innovations and their lasting impact on the cultures that followed. The legacy of the Hittites also lives on in modern scholarship. Archaeologists and historians continue to uncover new discoveries about Hittite society, helping us to better understand their complex world. The decipherment of Hittite cuneiform, for example, has allowed scholars to read ancient Hittite texts and gain insights into their political, social, and religious systems. These ongoing discoveries offer a deeper appreciation for the Hittites and ensure that their legacy is preserved for future generations. In the popular imagination, the Hittites remain a symbol of ancient mystery and grandeur. Their civilization, though long gone, continues to inspire works of fiction, documentaries, and academic studies. The Hittites' story serves as a reminder of the fleeting nature of empires, but also of the enduring power of culture, innovation, and diplomacy. The Hittite Empire may have fallen, but its contributions to the ancient world and to the development of civilization are still felt today, from their advancements in ironworking and military tactics to their legal codes and diplomatic achievements. The Hittites left a lasting mark on history. Their legacy endures not only in the ancient artifacts and ruins that continue to be uncovered, but also in the values and innovations that shaped the course of future empires. As we reflect on the story of the Hittite Empire, we are reminded of the resilience of human civilization and the ways in which cultures rise, flourish, and eventually fall, yet leave behind legacies that continue to influence and inspire us long after they have disappeared. The Hittites may have been forgotten by many for centuries, but their story, their achievements, and their impact on the ancient world will forever remain a significant chapter in the history of human civilization.